Today on The Independent, flag football championship winning coach Tim O'Malley joins the show to talk about coaching Marcus Freeman's kids, getting at it with Marcus Freeman at a Notre Dame press conference this week, and of course, to preview the final four games of the Irish this season. We'll talk that and more on today's episode of The Independent. Welcome to the latest episode of The Independent. I'm Pete Sampson, joined as always by my co-host Matt Fortuna. And today, technically one of my other co-hosts from a different podcast, Irish Illustrated Insider, Tim O'Malley, who I think I don't know how many hours of podcasts we've done together or how many road game beers and restaurants we frequented over the years. But today's appearance, if you're follow Marcus Freeman's press conferences or just have any pulse of sports now, since it's popped up on ESPN and it was relayed back to me by my kids and my kids' friends who played on Tim O'Malley's flag football team yesterday. You saw the exchange that Tim had with Marcus Freeman during the Monday press conference. And so, Tim, I want to just open the floor to you to explain what happened for those who haven't seen it and what it was like to sort of be on the other side of a press conference with Notre Dame's football head coach.
Yeah, I figured something was coming because he has actually made references when he's come to other games and practices, but they're kind of innocuous for other people. He does, he says, "How was practice?" or "I saw the game," or whatever yesterday. So when he walked in and looked at me, I'm like, oh, he's saying something, because he was out there for 5.5 hours with us for 3 games and 2 of his sons and 2 of my sons. So I had a feeling, I just didn't know he was going to have notes of critiques. That was a bit of a surprise for me. And he went in heavy on the critique part. This is why at one point I had to interrupt him and say, you're skipping over the championships here. But his critiques obviously were very funny. And I guess when there's one flag on his son who gets a 50-yard gain and it's called back and a loss of down, which seems kind of punitive to me in a second and third grade league. But anyway, it could be considered my fault as the coach of the team. Maybe I should have made sure that Nico had a flag on. I'm not sure.
This has got to be a boom for recruiting, right? I mean, to have the Notre Dame head coach talking about your team and to have it go on SportsCenter. I mean, you already got Bagman working for you, right?
I mean, look, I got a 10-year-old who wants to join this team. And Tim and I have talked about this. He's probably more of a middle linebacker than anything else. But now I feel like his spot's going to get squeezed out based on all this recruiting.
Yeah, that's the other team. And there's probably they're going to get the biggest recruiting hit from that, because the parents are going to want that team featured. It's just like it's like 38 years ago, Matt. It's the Bears or the story again in sports. But that's the second and third grade team is the Bears. And in reality, he has, to their credit, he and a lot of coaches do come to their sons' games quite often. A lot more in the spring, obviously, for natural reasons, because the games are played on Sundays in the fall and Sundays in the spring. So they're there quite often, and their kids are interested in football. So it's kind of fun when you have a bunch of kids interested in football all collected onto one team. It's been fun in the past. I think I joked with Pete that the first time I ever coached them, it was there were some preschoolers on the team, and that's just a different world of tying shoes for 30 minutes and 60 minutes and telling people we don't need to practice for an hour, even though the league kind of asks us to. Let's go ahead and show up just before the game and have some fun.
It's a fun league in South Bend. My 10-year-old has played in it probably 3 different seasons, and it was funny being out there in the spring because I think he played against a team that had one of Jared Parker's daughters on it, and I audibly heard the head coach of the team asked Parker if he wanted to be the offensive coordinator because they weren't scoring any points at the time. And Parker joking back the coach joked like, "I don't think I could pay as much as Marcus Freeman does, but if you have any interest, you could join it." And it was funny hearing Freeman's sort of internal podcast appearance with Notre Dame on Wake Up the Echoes, where he said that I think there were 5 coaches out who had kids in the league.
And Parker's daughter is on my team now. Now, the fun thing was I coached Jared's younger daughter when she was in kindergarten or preschool. So that was a lot of fun last spring. This is the second, third grade league, but she is on this team too. So it's 5. It's 5, including Coach Freeman.
Yeah. And I think Marcus said that all of them pretty much understand how to just be a parent, except for Gaduli.
Now, I did not hear a lot from him. I hear from Marcus before every opening drive. There's some chatter about I'm watching the offense, I'm watching this. But there's a lot of fast kids on this team. So I usually just have something we'll run off a quick 65-yard touchdown and I'll shoot back. Are you watching that one? Do you take notes on that? So this game did not go that way. It was 0-0 at the half. And I could actually feel people watching me from the other sideline or from the parent sideline thinking to themselves, we're all out here for this final game to go undefeated and you guys can't score. And I will say it was the offense's fault for a while. We were getting down, as Marcus pointed out. We were in the red zone a lot and did not come away with some points. I still contend that reverse pass was open, Pete and Matt, but you have to execute, of course. So I did not know that, but I could see now that we didn't talk as much after that game. So maybe Gino was not happy with my play calling during the situation.
Hey, this is going to be Olympic sport in 5 years. These kids will be old enough by that point.
That's right.
You could set yourself up well here.
4th and 5th graders. No, as Pete knows, though, he has some friends. His son Tate has friends on my 4th and 5th grade team, which one of Marcus's sons is on that too. And that was what made for the long day. We had a semifinals and a finals out there. So I think we accidentally walked in together, Coach Freeman and I, at like noon, just randomly from the parking lot. And I think we both left at about 6. And so I had a feeling he was going to have something to say about the day because we were out there for a long time.
It's hard to observe any coach for 6 hours, as I have done for stories, and not come away with something to talk about at the very end of it. It's just,
I'm sure,
just a lot of material. So I've coached flag football. I've coached youth basketball, mostly only against some coaches' kids, Marcus included. And I guess I've always sort of been impressed by like how often he shows up to that stuff. And I don't know if I should be or not, but it struck me as like notable, like that when he can find time to be a normal dad, he makes it a priority.
I agree. They were at every game in the spring. Now the spring team was just Coach Parker and Freeman. 3 kids among them. Freeman's little girl was also on that team. But this fall, I mean, they made it to both bye week game. If you think both bye weeks would be Sunday post USC and Sunday this bye week, and I think another one earlier on before the season too. So I mean, they, obviously they have their work to do in the fall on Sundays, but they're regulars from where I go, and I've seen my daughter used to play volleyball with Coach Parker's other daughter actually, and they would be at games. Those are probably a little easier for them to get to in the winter than fall Sundays. Fall Sundays are hard for us to get to the way we get there. Yeah. So it's going to be a little bit harder for people that should technically, we should take fall Sundays.
I think it's one of the reasons Tate didn't play in the fall. It's just like, I can't go to those.
Yeah, you were grilling me on that. You're like, how's it going to go in the fall? I was like, oh, we're going to make it work. So it was a very early drive up from Louisville. The night games, if you wonder why I hate night games, other than I've always hated them, I really hated night games this year. There was a lot of early flights and early drives.
I make that mistake all the time where it's like, yeah, I'm out all day Saturday. I'm usually at a game. It's usually a night game. I'm usually getting home really late or flying back Sunday morning. But I always say, like, Katie, you got the kids on Saturday. I got them Sunday no matter what. And then when they're jumping on my lap at 6 a.m. and I'm working on 2 hours of sleep, I immediately regret that. But it's different. I mean, Marcus Freeman in particular, but all the coaches whose kids you've coached. I mean, do they get time alone there, or people like are both parents understanding like they're just other dads here, or they want their time too?
I think they're pretty good about it now. The one thing is like you practice for an hour and then you play for an hour. So I'm actually not over on that sideline. They're usually on an opposite sideline from the players and the practices. I know that they get some people coming and talking to them, of course. It's natural that's going to happen. But I will say this particular season, I mean, they were just in the giant collection of fans and parents, not fans, parents and fans. There weren't a lot of fans, I hope, other than parents and families there that were watching, but they were sitting in the giant collection of people. So that was, maybe the way they were, it's at Riley, the way they set up the fields, they had to be there, but they're in a big group of people. And I think because it's the last day, it was like, it seemed like there's a lot of people. Maybe I just didn't want to lose, but there was a lot of people there for those 4th and 5th grade games. They were sitting right in there.
And do you think Freeman's kids have presented, like, well, Gino in particular, the trophy to Marcus? Like, hey, this is, I won. Like, let's get this done here, Marcus.
Yeah, I hope so. And we won with defense on both stops too. Actually, Gino deserves a shout out because a lot of people won it, but he deflected the potential game-winning 2-point conversion with no time left when we won by 1 in the semifinals. So without that, we did not play in the finals. So that's And Coach Stanley, who I threw under the bus when Marcus Freeman asked me whose fault it was. His son Will also scored in the championship game, so that was it was a lot of help around. My son will kill me if I don't say Declan had 3 interceptions on the day. So
basically, Catholics versus convicts 2.0, 25 years later.
Oh, it was
35 years later.
And I don't know if I guess I'll say it. He doesn't care. He's a great guy. An ex-Notre Dame football player, DJ Fitzpatrick, was the coach of the. It's kind of like the other St. Pius team. They have a lot of St. Pius kids. And when they scored at the end, I was like, oh, God, we're going to overtime. I think we'll beat them in overtime. And he's like, we're going for 2. I'm like, oh, you're going for 2, really? So that was a very, very, very important knockdown for Gino and for Declan, because they have a lot of friends on that team that would not have let them forget about it over the long off season. As you know, you got to win your bowl game, otherwise the off season's awful. So you can imagine what a playoff game is.
You just got to tell them, look, say kids, I'm going on Matt and Pete's podcast. They come on mine. We can all play nice, even though we're competitors here.
Yes.
I don't. Does Gino Freeman know who Pat Terrell is?
That's a good question. We should ask him that. We were. I was really shocked when he's like, "We're going for 2." I was like, "Oh gosh, I forgot that was an option. We're in trouble here. This is a problem." But very, very grateful for him to doing that.
Yeah, I was also kind of curious. You've coached more than I have, but I do remember like when I coached flag football, texting with Reese about like it would be. I wasn't asking for advice because that's stupid. He's Alabama's offense coordinator and Notre Dame's former offense coordinator. Like, you're not giving me advice on what plays I should run. But he did say, like, just find something that you do well and do that over and over and over again. Like, have you sounded out any of the Notre Dame coaches about like, hey, what do you think I should do here?
I tell you what, no, but last spring, and I find this hysterical because in the 4th and 5th grade, it is pretty competitive. I mean, kids are getting better at sports and the parents care more. Unfortunately, you can tell. I mean, I don't mean just coaches' parents. I mean, all parents on sidelines. And I noticed that because our team happened to be winning, and then you would hear angry parents from the other side. You're like, hey, guys, chill out. But on the preschool, kindergarten, 1st grade team, and that's why this is very important, that Parker's daughter and Freeman's son and daughter were on, and my son, Charlie, who makes appearances in Monday Musings quite often. At the end of the year, Parker came up to me in the end zone and said, I really like what you did with the delay game these last few games, because we started doing delay handoffs. So like they can't really throw at that age yet. You know, they're getting a little better in 2nd and 3rd grade, but you have to hand off. So eventually some fast kids would stand right by the line and grab our fast kids flag. So I was like, all right, well, here's the plan. Drop back to pass, let everybody run backwards, and then hand it off after like 3 seconds. And then it would be wide open. So I was like, wow, you just broke down a preschool, kindergarten, and 1st grade team. So I'm glad I instituted the delayed handoff, the delay game. If you see the delay game maybe at Notre Dame Stadium, you maybe listen to the podcast. You never know.
Yeah, when Jeremiah Love takes a draw for 65 yards against Pittsburgh, it'll be like, oh, that's O'Malley.
Well, if it's a reverse, as Mike Golick Jr. said, if there's a reverse pass into the end zone on senior day,
oh my God,
where that came from too.
Pete was being nice. Reese really replied in all caps, do your job.
Yeah.
And that was that. But I am getting reports from sources saying Connor Stallions purchased tickets to these flag games. And
I think he did, because I got to tell you, this is the shout out to, I don't know any, I wish I knew parents or a player on the team. We had 0-0 tie. So we go into it and they're shorthanded. We look over, we have like 12 kids, which is a lot to manage. You play, I don't know what, there's no way people know this. You play 5 at a time. We have 12 kids. So there's a lot of subbing. And on this team, they all want the ball and they all want to play. And the whole huddle is, I want the ball, I want the ball, I want the ball, I want the ball, I want the ball. Like, so the entire time. He only had 5 kids. So like we went up to the officials, we're like, hey, they can, do you want us to pull someone off the field once in a while for them or make it easier? Because they were like a 500 team and we hadn't lost. And usually we're winning by a lot and like trying to get everybody a touchdown. And he's like, yeah, and if you could let them, he's like, these aren't even their coaches. Their coaches didn't show up. These are just 2 parents. So that's the team that was 0-0 at the half. Yep. So I was like, yeah, give them extra time in the huddle. And just let them do everything. So yeah, all of a sudden, I have a feeling that they were actually scamming us a little bit, and there was some sign stealing, or Belichick actually was there for the Patriots, because the Patriots deserved to win. They just did not happen to do it that day.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned like Parker complimenting your delay game. There was a basketball game that I coached in the winter where our team went against one of Freeman's kids' teams, and I didn't know Marcus was at the game, but as I was talking to my team, we lost. After the game, I looked down and I got a message from Marcus, and it gave me, and it was like, here's my dispatch for the Athletic. And it gave me a full scouting report of our team, including how our point guard needed to pass a little bit more because he had missed the open man. After the game, our point guard was in tears because it's second graders. They cry when they lose.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, okay. I got something to cheer you up, Branton. Like, I just got this message from Marcus Freeman. He thinks you're a really good player, and like, just keep trying. You're coming a long way. And he looks up at me through tears and is like, "Who's Marcus Freeman?" And I was like, "Damn, that was like the best. I had like the best coaching material right here, and it just went nowhere." Because once you have to explain who Marcus Freeman is, like, really the impact is lost.
But right when you said that, I got flashbacks of, I think you, Pete, were the one who told Sheldon Day that Tom Mendoza had something to say, compliment about him. And he goes, "Mendoza, that dude's alive?"
Yeah. Yes. You just never quite know which names track and which names don't, especially with second graders.
Yeah. But Brian Kelly was texting you guys all the time about this stuff, too.
Yeah, right. Tim, I did want to ask you this because one of the coaching your own kids is awesome, or coaching is awesome. But and you mentioned how exhausting Sunday was. I found this true with flag football and basketball, that I definitely had a different appreciation of coaches having to talk to the media immediately after a game. Because like, we have almost no stakes in what we're doing. Like, barely anyone is watching. It's just the kids. You got to figure out something to say, move on, get a juice box. Life is good. But I found like I'm completely wound up after these games, and like my brain is scrambled. I can't imagine having to answer questions from professional reporters about it. Like that, I definitely had a different appreciation for that part of coaching after doing this.
I honestly, and I've joked about this, but when it was 0-0 at the half and they're all there, I'm like, I cannot believe it's 0-0 at the half and all these people are watching this game right now. I was like, oh, how is this happening? How have I done this? Not the one time, but the time everybody's here, like they have donuts. It's supposed to be a party afterwards. I literally thought, I was like, I can't believe I think this, but we can't lose. We can't lose this game. You're not supposed to think that, especially in the second and third grade league. So I should give a shout out. That one, I think, was sealed by Mikey Washington with a pick six. So that was a pretty big deal. It's one of Charlie's friends from St. Pius. That was so he saved any bad press conference for me. There was a lot of happy parents, a lot of high fives, but I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't have gone so well if we lost 7-6 or something along those lines to a team that had one kid wearing pajamas pulling our flags. By the way, I want to point that out. He wasn't.
I don't want to imagine what the Monday press conference with Marcus would have been if you had lost.
The fastest kid I've ever seen wearing pajamas in my life was pulling our best players' flags all over the field, and I just kept looking over at our other coach, Brian Stanley. I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do, man. I didn't think that was going to happen. I did not think he would be able to pull his flags.
The fastest kid I've ever seen wearing pajamas, as opposed to the slowest kid I've ever seen wearing pajamas.
Yes, the only one in flag football history, and he was good.
This is like unrelated, but someone sent me a meme on Instagram this week that immediately I thought of while we're doing the show. From the dad, quote, "My favorite sports team keeps losing so much I don't even want to watch their games anymore. But my wife tells me I have to because, quote, it's just 9-year-olds playing soccer and we have to support our daughter."
That is great. Actually, it's a good point. You guys make a really good point because Pete, you say you're wound up, and I didn't sleep that well, even though we won the championship games. I really didn't sleep that well that night. I was like, man, that was a long day. That was a lot of stress going on because you also you don't care during the season as much about wins and losses in youth league games, but when you're actually in a final game and all the kids are nervous and playing, you really do kind of care. Everybody's into it. But our other coach, Brian Stanley, so he coaches with me, and then his son is on our 4th and 5th grade team. He doesn't coach. After those 3 games he came to for championships, he had to go to Marion for his daughter's championship game soccer for St. Pius, and that went into penalty kicks. So that guy's day and his wife's day must have been the longest thing trying to watch 3 kids in 4 championship games. I was like, man, I don't know what I went home and just completely tried to decompress. I can't believe you had to go do another one. So that's a rough life if you're on those rare days where you get to play for something where people care.
One of the best parts of starting the Independent podcast was a chance to pick the brands we wanted to work with, and Roback was at the top of my list. As the owner of multiple polos, hoodies, Q-zips, and shorts, I can tell you the quality, fit, and feel is unmatched. You've probably seen Roback on Audric Estime, Kyle Hamilton, and Michael Mayer. Or maybe you saw the dozen Notre Dame fans wearing the Shamrock polo at the Central Michigan game last weekend. I can tell you I saw Roback gear in Dublin earlier this year. While the gear hasn't made me quite that athletic as those Notre Dame football players, Roback is my go-to on the golf course, heading to the lake, watching my kids' sports, or just walking the dog. So make sure you're comfortable throughout the season with Roback. Use code IRISH for 20% off your first purchase. That's code IRISH for 20% off all hoodies, polos, Q-zips, and more.
Hey, Matt, Notre Dame's season is hitting its home stretch, and it's outlined against a blue-gray October sky, so you know what that means.
I sure do, Pete. It means it's time to gear up for Notre Dame football with Home Field apparel. Home Field digs through the archives and history of the Irish to find unique logos, mascots, and moments to make thoughtful designs for your school. And there's no better time than fall weather, football weather, to support Notre Dame football and Home Field apparel. First-time customers can get 10% off their first order using code INDEPENDENT23 at checkout. That's on all Notre Dame apparel at homefieldapparel.com.
Matt, what have you always said is my biggest weakness on fall Saturdays?
Well, Pete, I'd say your hair, but who am I to talk? Let's go with your wardrobe.
Harsh but fair.
ESQ outfits over 400 professional athletes, celebrities, and Irish players on game day, with bespoke clothing that elevates their game off the field. ESQ sculpts every garment with precision, helping you look your best for work, weddings, celebrations, or in your case, Pete, the press box.
Listeners of The Independent can get 15% off their first online order by using the code IND15 at checkout. That's IND15, or visit them at their Chicago showroom for a full custom look. Head to esqclothing.com to create your perfect fit. Well, maybe that's a good pivot into this season because it's also been fairly stressful. The team that we cover professionally, through 8 games, is this like kind of about what you expected? I mean, we've talked about this on Irish Illustrated Insider quite a bit, but for listeners of The Independent, how close or far from expectations do you think this team is?
You know, I had it as a 2-loss team, but not like this. Obviously the Ohio State game was the coin toss game. And going in, USC was a coin toss game. You don't think of it that way now. I did not think they would lose to Louisville preseason or pregame. Pregame we all did. Preseason or pre-week. Yeah. Remember, we were on the field during pregame. We're like, there is something wrong out here. I wish we were able to harness that feeling and use it all the time to bet on things because we could tell something was up. But I actually have this game. I had Notre Dame having 1 loss right now, and this game being the dead trap game where people aren't as up for it because you're coming off a bye, you expect to win. Sleepy Notre Dame football Saturdays we've all seen 100 times, whereas the 3:30 kickoff against someone like Pitt. You know, the USC game had no chance of being a letdown. No matter what they are, the USC game is going to be big at night. This game had no chance of being big unless Phil Dracovic was the quarterback and Pitt was very good. Neither one of those things are true. So I don't think they'll lose to Pitt. But I would have had them having 2 losses by this point, including because you have to pick in the preseason for fun. It's impossible to pick 10 game scores or 12 game scores, but you try it anyway because people like to read it. And I had Pitt as the loss, and people were very unhappy with that call. But maybe you could just channel, if you're a Notre Dame fan angry about that, still you can channel the Louisville loss instead of the Pitt loss. I would not think that they will. I don't think they will lose this game, but it will be a sleepy Saturday in South Bend where it's not as exciting all of a sudden, and you can look up and you're like, why is this score 10-6?
No, that's how I forecast at the beginning of the season too, right? At 9-3, I said they'll beat USC and they're going to lose a game that we don't see coming out.
Right.
Could have been Pitt, Duke, NC State, ends up being Louisville. Did you guys see the way that game ended, by the way, Pitt, Wake Forest last week? I mean, the number of things, like I saw the highlights after the quarterback sliding before the first down marker, which I actually thought was a good call. I know it's controversial, but I thought they got it right. And then I saw the game-winning touchdown, which I'm still not sure was a touchdown. If you watch Bad Beats, you'll know what I'm talking about. But I didn't realize they replayed it the other night, so I had it on in the background while I was doing work. And, like, Pitt intercepted the ball with less than 2 minutes left. I mean, by midfield. And they got 2 celebration penalties, so they're backed all the way up. Then they go 3 and out where Wake didn't even have to use all 3 timeouts, and then they have a terrible punt. Like, I'd have to go back and look at the win probability. If it was anything less than 99%, I'd be shocked. Like Pitt completely had that game. And keep in mind, Wake had a third string quarterback.
Third string quarterback, yeah.
That game. Santino Marucci, man after my heart. I guess his dad played for the one of the Miami championship teams back in the day. But that was like, if you take Pitt football under Pat Narduzzi and you want like, hey, here's what it's been. It's that win over Louisville, who's undefeated, followed immediately by a perplexing meltdown loss against a third string quarterback on the road in that fashion. It looked bad enough on paper, and then rewatching the second half, I just cannot believe they lost that game. In some ways, it makes them even more dangerous, just knowing the way they operate as a program coming to this game. I don't think they're going to win, but the Nard Dogs always got something up his sleeve for these big games.
I don't think they're going to win either, Matt, but there's no way I would like lay 20 points in this situation.
Yeah, no.
I wouldn't even consider it. Doesn't mean it can't happen. You can win. Notre Dame could win 28-7 because Pitt doesn't have a really good offense. But I just like this. It just seems
Sebo, make it your words.
I know.
Yeah, it just
when
felt
Sebo left, he had more touchdowns than Michael Mayer.
Yeah, man. It's like when I saw that line, I was like, is it going to be 20-0? Because it just every game against Pat Narduzzi just feels like a slog and a trip to the dentist's office.
Yes.
Like even going back to the Michigan State game in 2013 2013
Gloria
was really one of the ugliest Notre Dame football games that I've covered in 23 years on the beat. And I feel like Pat Narduzzi has had a hand in many of the ugly games that I've covered. And it's like when the times where Notre Dame has broken out, they've always had like a game-breaking receiver on the outside. This team doesn't. So it feels like a team that is potentially, at least, could like walk into the trap of Pat Narduzzi's defense.
Yeah, I felt like that 18 game they were coming off back-to-back of Stanford, which they were number 7 at the time, and Virginia Tech, the first time going to Virginia Tech with Enter Sandman. It was such a big deal. And then they had Pitt coming in, and Ian Book could not have looked better over his last couple starts. And that was just a 60 minutes of junk. I mean, I remember
that was
trying to figure out offensive game ball, and I was like,
I forgot.
There was
I was thinking the
Vanderbilt
game.
Remember, like we were all sort of like tracking some Ian Book rumors, like is he going to play? Is he not going to play?
That's right.
Pitt had a kick return touchdown in that game as well, and that's when you're like, oh, something's up. That's because those things. I mean, that changes things completely when a team that can't score does that.
Yeah, 2020 is the one year, the COVID year, where they went out there and just beat the crap out of them.
Yeah, just killed them. And we would not have guessed that. That was a decent Pitt team, but they did not have Pickett. They had Joey Yellen.
Yeah,
right,
and they had to he didn't know any of the plays, so he had to come to the sideline to get him, and then go back in.
It's the Ben Skoranek game.
The Ben.
That's
Skoranek
right.
game.
That's right.
And I think they had a block punt maybe in that one.
Yeah.
Eat your heart out, Brian Mason, on that. Like it's because that was the team that sort of like that's when they sort of got loose, and we were like,
that was when
maybe they could be Clemson down the road.
Kelly, because I think we had McGlinchey on our show then, and he was talking about how much he likes home games better. And he looked at me crazy when I said, I just got a feeling they're going to get away from home for the first time in COVID, and they're just going to let loose. But I remember that was a game where Kelly comes in after and just is talking pretty much only about Clemson, which was still like 3 weeks away. And you're like, all right, this team's, if he's confident enough to put this out there right now, this team's for real.
Yeah. What I was interested in, we've talked a lot about like the quarterback situation and, what Marcus maybe learned from year 1 to year 2, what the lessons in year 2 will mean for year 3. What I was interested in sort of how you've seen him kind of like learn some tough stuff, but, adapt on the fly. And like the end result is now Notre Dame has Sam Hartman.
Yeah, well, I think that's the number one lesson from year 1 to year 2 is they were not going to get stuck again as they did year 1. We all felt they needed a quarterback going into year 1. In retrospect, it's so obvious they needed a quarterback going to year 1, but you can kind of look at it and think, well, Tyler Buchner was recruited here to become a multi-year starter at Notre Dame. So I could see being talked out of it. It's tough when you look at you're starting at Ohio State and you think, well, you want to start your season with a guy that's really never played as your starting quarterback at Ohio State. So I think that will go into this offseason as well. Do you want to start at Kyle Field with a guy that has never played in the wake of Sam Hartman? Even yesterday, hearing Jared Parker say, because of Sam Hartman's accuracy and some things he can do, we can open these things up more. I would just think that going forward, until you know something about a player you have on campus that you love, let's say if it's Steve Angeli, if it's Kenny Minchie, CJ Carr, Deuce Knight, all these guys, they can't all play for Notre Dame. But until you really, really believe that they can lead you into a contending season, I don't see how at Notre Dame you don't go out and try to get the number 1 or number 2 transfer quarterback you can. I don't think you settle for anybody anymore. But if your baseline is Jack Cohn, don't you want Jack Cohn winning that game at Kyle Field?
Yeah, I want him at least starting it.
That's what I'm saying. Baseline is you don't go. I don't think you go below. Jack Cohn did a great job for Notre Dame. But when Jack Cohn came in, we thought, oh, that was a good pickup, good idea. You didn't think they just saved the season like when they got Sam Hartman.
Right. Yeah. Because it's like, I think people forget there was a air quotes competition at quarterback with Cohn, which he won quickly, but it certainly felt like there was more. It wasn't as automatic with Hartman as it was, or I'm sorry, it wasn't as automatic with Cohn as it was with Hartman.
And I feel like Cohn is your baseline floor. That is, you definitely get a guy like Jack Cohn. I don't know if you're Notre Dame and you have CJ Carr and these guys coming in and Kenny Minchie, just people you want to develop. If you go, I think we talked about a lot with Tim Priester when he mentioned a really good freshman, because you can get freshman transfers like you could get grad transfers at Notre Dame. There's that small window. I don't know about a really good freshman transfer out. I think that might be the one thing you don't want as a Notre Dame fan, even a Notre Dame coach, that, okay, well, I'm just bringing in a guy that may or may not be able to win the job. Now, I don't think like Trevor Lawrence is transferring as a freshman. That's why I'm saying these things. These are backup freshmen going somewhere else. That's the whole point.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. That's like, are you upsetting the ecosystem of the room at that point?
Yeah, I don't like that ecosystem comment.
Yeah, it seems like it's got to be a Cohn, Hartman, type who's played, because like to take somebody in, the most important thing that they can have is experience.
Yeah,
and if you're taking 1 year really played, like unless you know the guys on your team can't play, which I don't think is the case.
I don't either. And I think the 1 year window at least allows you to massage the situation for those younger guys, as opposed to he has 2 years left, because who's staying around? I mean, anybody quarterbacks have transferred for 40 years. That's not all NIL and modern transfer rules related. That's the one position that either you at Notre Dame, and I assume at other programs, you start or you transfer, or you're not good enough to have ever started, so you don't worry about starting. When you say Cohn Hartman, I think what will happen is the next graduate transfer probably falls in between in that window, because Sam Hartman's the 19th all-time leading passer coming into the season.
Kind of hard to do better.
And Jack Cohn was a pretty good guy, so I think he's
Cohn, Cohn I thought was good.
Yeah.
And to your point, the reaction was, all right, they got their starter for next year, but like he might not have had a place to start. Like he had to transfer. Sam Hartman did not have to transfer.
Right.
So the reaction was certainly different, in terms of getting both guys. But now I'm with you. I mean, you're seeing now with Ohio State, right? Like they would be a national championship team if they had CJ Stroud still, or if they went out and got Drake May. And I don't mean to like knock all over Kyle McCord, but like you just watch them play week after week, and that's what's different between this Ohio State team and the last 10 or 15 Ohio State teams that have been national championship contenders. And maybe they still can get there because they're that good on defense, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is that good. But I just can't believe a place like that wouldn't explore their options deeper elsewhere. And I think that will serve as a harsh lesson for the Buckeyes. And, it served as a harsh lesson for Notre Dame last year. And I just think you're going to see that everywhere now when you lose a guy. Like you can't – I think they're pretty confident in the guys that are in that room. But first start, Kyle Field – I mean, you need to go out and get a guy. I don't know who that guy is, but that's something we're all going to have to be monitoring November, December, January.
And Pete reminded me that it was actually late November when we started talking about Sam Hartman. I mentioned on our podcast, Irish Illustrated Insider, I don't think we talked about Sam Hartman coming to Notre Dame by Halloween. I guess that was right around the time post Stanford was right around the time we brought it up. But just imagine, like when you say you don't know who it is, we don't know who it is. Probably there's a couple names you can throw out there, but there were names.
I'll throw it out. Cam Rising's out for the year. He's eligible next year. Bring him and Andy Ludwig in.
A lot of material on that one. I think Marcus did say he watched the USC Utah game a little bit on his Saturday night off, which I found interesting. But
and Andy Ludwig watches Notre Dame hockey games on his Saturday nights off.
Just never know. It's like. Is it going to be Michael Pratt or Riley Leonard, probably.
I thought it was going to be Pratt last year.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
that's what I'm saying.
wild.
Now we're still looking at that as a possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, remember Hudson Card's name was thrown around last year.
Yeah,
Remember
who's
the difference
like
between
the
Hudson Card and Sam
backup
Hartman?
at Purdue, right? Like
Yeah.
he doesn't play.
No, Hudson's starting.
Oh, does it? Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, he's good. He's good.
But yeah,
It's
it's like
the only good thing about them.
yeah, it's kind of got to be like a Devin Leary, Hudson Card level of quarterback, opposed to a Sam Hartman level of quarterback. Just it's like I don't know, but last year was such a weird year where like every ACC quarterback was eligible for a grad transfer and wanted to do it. I don't know. Is it like Garrett Schrader at Syracuse or something? I don't know if he has any eligibility left, but like, is there somebody else out there who's like a mid-level Power 5 quarterback who just like wants to step up a level? That seems to be the I guess the well I would try to go to if I was Notre Dame.
Tyler Van Dyke. I'm just throwing names out there.
Yeah, Hartman will be unique forever though because he's such a good, proven college quarterback that wasn't able to immediately go pro and know he would make the league, and he needed a higher profile. It's hard to be that productive and want to go play more college football, I think.
Which it's like you mentioned when we were kind of rehashing, like, all right, when did we know it could be Hartman? There was a time when Hartman came out and said, like, I'm not playing college football anymore. Like, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
So when he said it, and people are asking me, like, what do you think about Sam Hartman as a grad transfer? I mean, my initial reaction was like, I think that's a great idea, but Sam Hartman thinks it's a terrible idea. He doesn't want to do it. And it wasn't a question of whether he was going to come back to Wake for a 6 year. It was whether he wanted to play college football at all. And he had come to the decision he didn't. But I do think, the NIL dynamics, versus like being a practice squad quarterback, all of that lends itself to, I think we're in a position now where like, if you're a Notre Dame or, Florida, there are quarterbacks available to you that want to take a step up, and you have the resources to make that happen. I mean, it's like I appreciated Sam Hartman referencing after USC, like they don't pay me enough to get a Ferrari for Al Golden.
A second
Ferrari. So, but maybe that is the implication that they pay him enough to get a first one.
I think that was his point. Was they don't because he already offered a Ferrari, so they don't pay me enough for.
Jadar Sanders drives a Rolls Royce, right? I mean, hey.
Yeah.
His dad, he had family. He might have had family money though too, man. That's it.
Maybe.
But it's like, yeah, that part is available to Notre Dame. Like, I think that it seems anecdotally that from an NIL point of view, like Notre Dame has got that part of the game in a good way.
Just think of the transfers they brought in this year. I mean, it impacted the defensive line. Their nickel is one of their best 12 players on the team this year. The defensive lineman they brought in is one of the best 12 players on the team. Sam Hartman's one of the best 5 players on the team. They just did a really good job of identifying. Spencer, you're always going to bring in a kicker. Go get a great grad transfer kicker every year. I know he's missed 2 kicks that could have helped, but they brought in a good kicker. Spencer Schrader's a good kicker.
Last year's the starter for the Saints now.
Yeah. Last year's the starter in the NFL. They just did a very good job, and you have to keep doing a good job because I did not know Ohio State's backup defensive end and Oklahoma State's solid veteran nickel could be one of Notre Dame's 12 best players, and it's not a cut down on Notre Dame. They're playing really well. I think they probably came where it fit well for them, and you got to keep doing that.
On the subject of NIL, I think Pete and I were texting a little bit about this last night. Tim, did you see Brady Quinn and Quincy Avery going at it?
I did
last night.
Yes.
Okay. I don't need to repeat it here though. That was. I don't want to say it was Brady Quinn's finest moment because I'm sure he pissed a lot of people off with it. Yeah. But my God, my jaw dropped when I saw.
My dropped so much I did not think Brady tweeted that. I thought somebody else did, and he was mentioning it. I was like, holy cow!
And I was before that one. I don't know whose side I'm with here. I could see both points. After that, I'm like, okay, we're going to that level now, and Brady's going to win this one.
I don't think there's a lot of desirable real estate in the defending Deshaun Watson neighborhood, nor has there been for some time.
No,
correct. But yeah. I could see why if you do work with the guy, he's called a trust fund baby who's not working hard. I could see you taking offense to that, especially if I have other clients.
Fair enough. The rest of the season, do you think Notre Dame wins out?
I do. I think Notre Dame fans are underestimating a little bit that Clemson could still play some defense, and they're going in there. I really do believe it's a big deal that they're not playing Clemson at night. I think the crowd would be nuts and would help them out. They haven't played a night game this year, correct? Clemson at home. That was at Duke, and Florida State was daytime. So
I feel like they might have had some non-conference ones, or I could be wrong.
If it was non-conference, I don't think that applies. But
right.
They are 18-1 this century in night games at Clemson, which doesn't sound like enough. They must do the one game thing as well. But 18-1 is remarkable but that's fantastic. The 12 o'clock game lends a little sleepiness to the Clemson crowd, I would think too. But boy, that's Clemson's biggest game now that they don't have much else to go for. That Clemson beating Notre Dame would help quite a bit, I think, assuage the 3 losses they've had. I don't think Notre Dame gets upset this weekend or on senior day. Or at Stanford, but Stanford all of a sudden looks like they can play football. At least that's a couple of weeks ago we were making fun of that. What's the worst team of the schedule? Tennessee State or Stanford? That's no longer the case. But that would be a surprising loss too. It seems like an easy one to get up for when you're out there for your last game of the season.
Yeah, it's weird how much the dynamics of the Clemson game has changed. Like when we talked in the summer, like I thought Clemson was going to be the most difficult game on the schedule.
I absolutely because of the night game. At Clemson situation, of course.
Clearly it's after Ohio State now, and I'm not sure that it's like is it like the spot for Louisville was difficult. I'm not saying Louisville is a great team, but the spot was difficult. I don't think the spot is difficult for Notre Dame going to Clemson anymore because of the start time and just like the way Clemson's season has gone and the fact that I don't know if Cade Klubnik is good.
They have a bye week after too. Notre Dame does. I mean,
I don't think it's a difficult spot now at all. Interestingly enough, I did write this. USC was in a bad spot when they were coming to Notre Dame after all those games where, I mean, obviously they didn't give their all in every game, like mentally speaking, but I mean, they were taken to the tin a couple times close because they're just not that good on defense. And that was a really rough spot to get with the wounded animal Notre Dame with the fans still behind them. Because they're still so much behind Notre Dame because of Marcus Freeman. If Brian Kelly lost that Louisville game, you would not have had the same atmosphere at Notre Dame Stadium. That's just the way it is. So I thought USC was in a bad spot there. Now Clemson and Notre Dame is just a football game. Clemson's in a great spot to try to take Notre Dame. But I agree with you guys. Like you can be up for the Clemson game. This is if you're Notre Dame football, you will be up for the Clemson game. I think fans expect an easy win. It'll be nothing like the USC game in terms of margin
or last year's Clemson game.
And no, I just think Clemson will come to play. But Notre Dame's defense is better than Clemson's offense. That's what they have going for them right now. They just have to make sure their offense can beat Clemson's defense.
Well, it's like even compared to like you were at Clemson in 2015, right?
15, I was not. No.
Okay, but I mean, Tim and I were there, and like that environment was big time and electric. And
that was the start of the run. Like that was novel then.
That you wrote
win the ACC.
Yeah. They were still Clemsoning. They were Clemsoning back then.
Bring your own guts game.
That's right.
But like that was an incredible road environment for Notre Dame to play in, and I don't think it's going to be even remotely close to that on November 4th, which is significant to me.
And a pretty good quarterback to play against and defensive line to play against as well for Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes back to Deshaun Watson.
To put that one in context, again, it's been that long since they played there. I mean, that was a BYOG game where like that was kind of really Dabo's first national moment, and people said,
it was. It definitely was. Yeah.
And now, 8 years later, he's talking about maybe we should lose some games to get people off the bandwagon, and then they go and lose to Miami. I mean, to think about how the narrative with that guy's changed since the last time Notre Dame has played there. Certainly, it's a lot to handle. But I do think you cannot overlook this team because they're still very talented. When you watch them play, I mean, it's got to be a frustrating team to be a fan of this year because they just have on offense so many self-inflicted wounds. I mean, they gave as good as Florida State's been, and they should probably be ranked 1 based on the wins they have. They completely gave that game away down the stretch. Clemson did. The Duke game, it was just a comedy of errors every single time. I think they outgained them. I think they made Duke's territory every single drive in the second half. Like they did score. And then the Miami game is just another one where the offensive, even the last play, Dabo Swinney says Cade Klubnik was supposed to hand it off, and he didn't. Like it's just they went out, they fired Brandon Streeter, hired Garrett Riley, and I'm thinking, man, like Dabo fired his longtime friend, like a Clemson alum. Like, he's not doing this for anybody. They're going to be really freaking good again. And it just has not worked out that way on that side of the ball at all. Now, again, very good on defense. They're going to make life really tough for Notre Dame. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, and I think it could go either way. But it certainly does not have the stakes that we all thought it would have. Even if it was a night game, I think the stakes would be much higher.
That's what I should have said when Coach Freeman asked me why the reverse pass. I said, well, he was supposed to run it in. It was just a end around. I don't know what they were doing out there, but there was Dabo got away with it, I guess.
Yeah, you blamed like the field conditions. It was too muddy or something.
It was muddy, actually. There was kids in pajamas can dive in mud. Apparently,
what's your? Do you have an offsides call if you're not lined up right?
We have.
It's flag football. The coaches are literally on the field.
That's why. Yeah, we are on the field. So that was why I said to Freeman, I noticed you're not talking about the 4th-5 game enough, because he was laughing. That was not coming out of his mouth. We actually had a in the 4-5 championship game. I told you they had and Matt, I don't know if you know this or not. The other team had Harrison Smith, so it made it really hard to gain yards because they had a 5th, 6th grade Harrison Smith running around out there. So he had timed our snap count. You have to blitz. You can blitz, but it's from 7 yards back. You can just go straight in. That's the big difference in the league. So it's actual pass rushing. And our quarterback would always clap, and then we would snap it. And he was flying in and halfway there on the clap. And of course, these refs aren't paid. They're not calling that.
Sometimes they're looking at their phone during
ACC refs.
So at some point, I just go, all right, we have to. I go, the snap is on the center. Gino, the snap's on you. You snap whenever you want. Clap, don't snap. And as soon as they take off, we just put it out from the sideline. He's offsides. Those kids just froze. And of course, we complete a real long pass because half their team is standing there watching because we said they're offsides. So the other coach, to his credit, is like, when they tell you you're offsides, it doesn't mean you have to stop playing. I was like, that's fantastic. So I was like, that coaching adjustment does not make the press conference, of course. But
man, between that and between your Niners fan, Harrison Smith must be on your not on your favorites list the last 48 hours.
He's always on my favorites list, but not going against him twice.
That's fantastic. All right, well, we can wrap it up there since we're getting the Harrison Smith references. Like,
we gotta get predictions.
We could go on forever with Hayseed.
We gotta go. Yes. We gotta get predictions. And I want to get one.
Predictions.
Sam,
not to spoil our podcast tomorrow, but what do you got this weekend?
Every time you say that, I want to say "Die Replacement Friends," and you better know what movie that's from.
Yeah. Yeah. I my one prediction would be the under. I can't take Notre Dame winning by 20 or 17 points. As I said, if they do, it's one of those, like, the spread's 17.5 and they win 24-6. That's the game you could see because Notre Dame's defense is that much better than Pittsburgh's offense. But I'm more in the you slog through it in a 27-13 win for Notre Dame. I don't think you completely can keep them out of the end zone. The defense won't always play like they did against USC, but it is quality defense, and I think they can help the offense enough there will be a lot more 3-and-outs in this game than you've seen furnished recently in Notre Dame football games, where I think they will give the offense some short fields, but it's still an offense that's going to settle for field goals at times. That's why I try to never do like a 28, 35, 21 score for Notre Dame this year, because I always see field goals coming into play.
Yeah, I think it's going to be even uglier than that. I would definitely bet the under. I would probably parlay that with Pittsburgh to cover. Just because it's like if you could put Miles Boykin or Chase Claypool or, heaven forbid, Will Fuller on this team, I think that could make a 3-touchdown difference in the game. But Notre Dame is just not in a position at wide receiver to hit Pat Narduzzi, where he has this huge blind spot in terms of how they play coverage. If you can get past the jam at the line of scrimmage, which I'm not sure Notre Dame's receivers can do, you can have a lot of success. So I like it like 17-12, like Pittsburgh has 4 field goals. I don't think this is going to be an enjoyable watch. I also think, based on previous Pittsburgh results, it is largely going to be irrelevant for the end of the season. There's been a lot of Pittsburgh one-off performances over the years that I've covered with Notre Dame. They very rarely have any predictive value for the other 11 or 12 games. So I go Notre Dame 17-12, and then we will not want to talk about it much longer afterwards.
Well,
That-
that
that's
1914
Iowa-
game.
Yes,
That
Iowa-
1914 game is the same thing. That 1914 game in 2018, we only talk about it all the time because it was 2018 and they went undefeated. Otherwise, no one would ever remember that game happened.
This is
You
one of
said
those games where I kind of want to predict 18-12 for like a overly clever
Yes.
overture reference. But like you could, with a straight face, predict 18-12 for this kind of a game.
When you said 1914, my first thought was the Cubs and the 1914 club, and you were referencing a game from over 100 years ago. But yeah, Pete's venturing into Iowa-esque territory, which is a little scary. The other thing is scary, and I only bring this up because I completely overlooked it with the Louisville game. Louisville was one of the teams that picked off Sam Hartman 3 or 4 times a year ago, and they went on and did it again. Pittsburgh picked off Sam Hartman, I think 4 times in the second half of the 2021 ACC title game. Again, a much better Pittsburgh team, much bigger stakes. I don't think it's a repeat performance, but again, I overlooked it with Louisville. I don't want to overlook this time. I'll go Notre Dame 27-14. So Pitt covers and it's under, and I think it's a backdoor cover. I think it's 27-7, and Pitt really wants to score at the end because that's what they want to do, and they're going to get one on Notre Dame's second teamers. But history says that Pitt has a chance here. Notre Dame season itself says that you can't really predict games week to week, but I just don't see a path here for this to be a particularly close game, even if Pete just threw Iowa, Minnesota right at us with that one. By the way, we can't get out of here without acknowledging milestone weekend, not just for Coach O'Malley. Both Brian Kelly and Bill Belichick got their 300th career wins. Round of applause. 2 Boston guys at the top of their sport. And LSU's tweet even said it means war because he did it here with our guys at LSU. So it just means war down there. I also, while we're talking gambling, I want to throw this out there because I noticed this by accident this week and I couldn't really believe it. And I don't know if it's still up there. It probably won't be long. On DraftKings, you can bet on the Doak Walker Award winner. The best odds right now are Audric Estimé at plus 500. Shocked me. And I'm not saying there's like a good alternative there, but like I just would not have watched this Notre Dame season and been like, oh, that guy's the best running back in the country. No questions asked.
He had a famous start to the year. That's probably helping him a little. And then the Duke game, people they remember one run.
He has highlights.
Yeah.
He's great, and he might win it. I mean, I was looking at the other guys. I'm like, there's no Christian McCaffrey this year, right? But there's
I did not know who you were going to say, Matt. I did not know who you were going to say.
That's what I'm saying. I was like, wait, he's the favorite? And you could, well, more importantly, you could bet on this Doak Walker Award. I might vote on that thing. I should probably recuse myself.
Yeah, you probably should. Yeah, it's funny. Like we had midseason All-Americans at the Athletic, and they asked me for like who I thought should make it, and I felt strongly about Joe Alt. Should if you want to put him on second team, that's fine. This was before Penn State got annihilated by JTT. Now maybe I'd move Alt up. And I like Howard Cross. Yeah. And I like Xavier Watts. But like Estime, I was like, I don't know.
I would have gotten to Morrison too along those lines. When I was going through the list of players. Watts is some recency bias there, though, Pete. That was a heck of a Watts game.
Well, I feel like he's had a really good season and then had a out-of-body experience against the Heisman Trophy winner. So
that's true. I don't even when you throw that part in, of course I know it was against the Heisman Trophy winner, but that was all against the guy that was absolutely unstoppable before that game. So
only guy to pick him off twice. And then I tweeted the stat when he won the Nagurski Award that week. I think his turnovers this year have directly led to, I think, 24 Notre Dame points, which is not insignificant when you look at how that offense was.
Like Xavier Watts has 25% of all Caleb Williams interceptions.
Yeah, I defrauded last week. I mean, he's got And Utah has like 90% of all his losses.
Yeah, there's a lot of material there. So, all right, well, before we get off on yet another tangent, we'll wrap up this episode of The Independent there. Thanks to Tim O'Malley of Irish Illustrated for joining the show. I'm Pete Sampson of The Athletic. He's Matt Fortuna of The Inside Zone. We've got the triumvirate of different publications here together in audio form.
Saving Silverman was the movie I was quoting. I hope you guys got that.
Yes.
You didn't respond. Okay.
We're there. All right.
All right.
On that note, thanks for being with us on the latest episode of The Independent. You can follow this podcast on Apple, Spotify. You can watch the show on YouTube if you want to see our beautiful faces. Please rate and review, subscribe. It helps with the visibility of the show. Until Matt and I reconvene on Saturday after what may be
ugly game according to you.
Afternoon to watch.
Hope it's not 17-12 if you're reconvening on Saturday.
That's going to be a tough podcast. But we'll be back on Saturday regardless with our post-game Pittsburgh show. Thanks for being with us on the latest episode of The Independent.